Walking belongs to all of us. Whose stories are carried forward is a reflection of who, quote-unquote, we are. Every now and then, I come across a comment about my book that mentions its glaring lack of Henry David Thoreau. Is it the lack that glares, I wonder, or Thoreau himself? Is there a Thoreau-shaped hole in the universe somewhere glaring at me? It does actually include Thoreau, exactly once, because I thought that without at least one mention, I'd be endlessly receiving kind emails pointing to his book article, Walking, which was originally published as a long piece in the Atlantic Monthly in 1862. Maybe I slipped it in so discreetly that nobody notices it. Leaving Thoreau out of the book was a conscious decision. I don't much like Walking. Thoreau begins it by writing scornfully of clerks and shop assistants who rarely have the chance to get their bodies and sun-deprived skin out of doors. I confess, he wrote, that I am astonished at the power of endurance, to say nothing of the moral insensibility of my neighbors who confine themselves to shops and offices the whole day for weeks and months, aye, and years almost altogether. I wonder how he would have dealt with pandemic lockdown in a city of millions. He waxes on about these morally insensible people for a bit before taking a jab at women. How womankind, who are confined to the house still more than men, stand it, I do not know, he wrote, later implying that women just up and go to bed at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I know it was a different time, but honestly. It might have bolstered him to know that I at least spent big chunks of 2020 going quietly insane because I had trouble getting out of the house for various reasons, mostly related to being a mother of young children during a pandemic specifically. Considering his reputation for being justice-minded, it's jarring to read such near contempt for people who had fewer choices than he did about how to spend their time, and certainly couldn't have spent 4 hours a day sauntering over the hills. Thoreau also did not have children, and it's easy to be dismissive of how people spend their time when you don't understand how much of it child-rearing and caregiving can take up. What's more relevant to me is the stranglehold that writers' fascination with Thoreau, William Wordsworth, the Stoics, and the like have had on what we imagine walking to be. I read large stacks of books on walking while researching my own book, and several more since, and almost none of them presented the action as a birthright of all humanity. Instead, it's walking as art, the walking of poets and philosophers, one might say elitist walking, seeming to agree with Thoreau's claim that it requires a direct dispensation from heaven to become a walker. It's intellectualized, cerebral walking. What about just walking to work? The subject of walking plays into the larger question of stories and how they create a society's vision of itself. American school students are taught to read Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne and so on because they're American classic. But who chooses a classic? Why do we have to read Hester Prynne's Adultery in the Scarlet Letter, but are rarely introduced to the fiercely independent pioneer Alexander Bergson in Willa Cather's O Pioneers? Not to mention anything by people whose ancestors have lived here for tens of thousands of years. Occasionally, a story of Leslie Marmon Silko's makes it into the K-12 curriculum, but she's a rare exception. Why is Thoreau hauled out as a model of freedom and self-sufficiency rather than, say, Sacagawea? Especially Sacagawea as an actual person, rather than solely in her role as Lewis and Clark's guide across much of the North American continent. Or Eleanor Pruitt Stewart, a single mother who actually did explore the Wyoming landscape as a homesteader, not only on her own, but with her 4-year-old daughter, and whose letters were also published in the Atlantic Monthly. This hardly needs reiterating because so many people have written about it, but Thoreau's time, quote-unquote, alone in the Walden Woods was punctuated by frequent dinners at his friends' houses in town and to his mother's house so she could do his laundry. Eleanor Pruitt Stewart's case shows that it's not just about who writes down the stories. Her collected Letters of a Woman Homesteader is a fun, engaging read scripted by an acute observer, and it was a bestseller in its time. It's about whose stories are accepted as a reflection of who we are. It's why we see such battles now over teaching a truer version of American history, acknowledging its violent beginnings and recent past, and cracking open our understanding of ourselves to be more varied and complex, rich and intricate. To rightfully ask what a society envisions when it says, we. I recently finished a book about the mathematician Ramanujan, The Man Who Knew Infinity, by Robert Kanigel. Everything about Ramanujan's life lends itself to drama and romance. His early mathematical gifts combined with his failures in school, his family's near poverty in South India, his persistence in finding someone who appreciated and could support his mathematical genius, his eventual success in catching the attention of Cambridge University's G.H. Hardy. The efforts involved in getting him to Cambridge, the groundbreaking work he did there, and his death in 1920 at the age of 32 from a long and intractable illness. Ramanujan left behind thousands of theorems and unique mathematical identities, work that confounded many of his contemporaries and still provides rich areas of research for mathematicians today. But in addition to detailing Ramanujan's life and genius, Kanigel also wrote of what it meant for the young mathematician to have found both financial and academic support, and wonders how many people in how many fields are never able to realize their potential due to lack of an environment in which they can thrive. What if he had been, Kanigel wrote, every inch the genius he was, with just as much to give the world, but his mother had been a little less supportive? Or he had been the barest bit less likable, or less sure of his abilities. For those who have biographies written about them, the system, with a capital S, by definition works. The measure of its failures lies in those who never bask in the warm glow of the world's acclaim, those you never hear about. It was one of the most surprising and enjoyable aspects of my walking research to hear people's relationships with walking, their own stories and experiences. More people than I ever imagined talked to me about walking, most of whom never made it into the book, but whose stories and the spontaneous sharing of them will stick with me forever. Sometimes it's the stories that are gifted to us, more than the ones we search for, that have the most staying power. The opening and growth of story obviously applies to more than walking, but it was and remains important to me because walking is such a formative part of our evolution, and I was and am tired of the stories around it being over-intellectualized. We are all walkers, whatever that looks like for each of us. Take care of yourselves.